Hi, everybody. I'm Peter Llewellyn from NetworkPharma TV. This is one of my so-called unscripted conversations where I get to chat with folks who I think can share something useful with us. So let's see what we learned today. So just for full context, I attended frankly, a fabulous event last week, Adventures in Pharma. And I say that, perhaps I should quickly say, I'm not being paid to say that, but genuinely, I thought it was a great event on all levels. It was an interesting crowd. Good program. It was well put together, and I just really enjoyed myself. So thank you very much to the organisers at Camino for that event, and Becky, who will introduce us in a minute, was part of that team. I genuinely thought it was good, and I'll be interested to hear what you all felt yourselves. Today, I wanted to reflect a bit on what we sort of learned from that meeting, and we have essentially got an organizer, Becky, a speaker, Yam, and a delegate, James. So that sort of gives us our different perspectives on what we did on the day. Can we just start with some quick introductions, just in your own words? And I'd like to start, James, with you, if I may. Who are you? What's your role? How did you get there? Just briefly, let's set the scene for us.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so hi everyone, great to be here. My name's James. I'm a product manager working at Johnson & Johnson in the UK, but I'm also involved in AI initiatives in the UK business as well. So looking at how we can adopt new technologies, but more importantly, embed them within the organization and being part of that change and transformation approach. So really invested in that, and as well from a cultural perspective, how do we get people to try new things and do things differently? I just need to flag that any views I'm going to be sharing in today's talk are my own. They're not representative of my organization. But yeah, great to be here, and thanks for having me.
No, fantastic. And thanks very much. We appreciate that. But thanks, James, for joining in. Yam, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Who are you? What are you doing now? And how did you get there?
I am somebody that's very excited by the opportunity for an unscripted conversation. This could be very dangerous, but very much looking forward to all the same. My name's Yam. I'm founder of the Black Sherpa, and essentially I help underrepresented professionals navigate the unwritten rules of the workplace. We've got a real passion to support people to build the right type of clarity and confidence to lead their careers, and I believe it's something that's necessary, particularly in the life sciences arena. That's a space where I've spent the last 20 years, and I'm really focused on creating tools, spaces, and strategies that help people to become unstuck, be seen, and be promoted and get on and do a great job. And the whole idea of applying that to AI specifically, I think, is massively important. The reality is it's landed, it's here, and it's having a massive impact already. The opportunity for it to have even greater impact is there, but it also potentially could throw up a couple of issues that I think we need to be aware of. So we need to spend a bit of time with some bright minds here, as we did on the day, to sort of think a little bit constructively about the best way to do that.
Excellent, and thanks very much for joining us. So, Becky, I'm sort of queuing you up now. You're the organizer, or you're representing the organisers at Camino. I've already said I thought it was a great event, so thank you very much. But tell us a little bit, about yourself. Start with yourself, and then we'll lead into the event. But give us the same sort of answer to the who you are, what you're doing now, and how you got there question. Okay, start with that.
Yeah. Perfect. So yeah, I'm Becky and I'm an account director at Camino. So I've been working within Medcoms for about 4 or so years, but I was lucky to be part of the group that kind of started off Camino. So been there for kind of the early days, and it feels really surreal now to think back to, I guess, a year and a half ago when there were just 6 of us in a room. And now we're looking at, we were in a room of about 120 people, I think, last week. So it's been so amazing to be part of the journey. In my role, obviously, I cover a lot of different things with clients, but my kind of, I guess, passion and favorite thing to do is events. I've always loved that. And so this is a really good opportunity to do that on a big scale and invite like a really big range of people from across pharma. But I've also been involved in quite a lot of pilot projects for AI for lots of our clients. So yeah, I guess this was a good chance to marry the two together in one day.
Fantastic. I do feel I need to clarify, in case anyone knows Camino and went a little bit like, crikey, you went from 6 to 100. What you were saying there was half a dozen of you at Camino, and there were 100 or so at the event. Camino's not quite that big, although it has grown a lot in the last year and a half. Yeah, okay, right. So listen, it just felt important to just put that in some sort of context. So look, I know, so I'd just like to hear a little bit about the thinking behind the event that happened last week. Just give us a bit of the thinking, how you set it up, what you were trying to achieve.
Thank you. Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about this with our clients and as a group for a while now. And I think we really noticed like a bit of a gap in the market for an event which focuses mostly on AI and pharma, with that like lens of making it practical, making it real, debunking some myths, and just making it like a really engaging conversation. So it was partly came from that, but it also gave us the opportunity to, I mean, I guess do some marketing for Camino. That's a big part of it, but work with people that we've collaborated with for years. We had some amazing partners who joined us, and the speakers who join us on the day are all people that we work with and love. So it was kind of that opportunity to connect a lot of people and also share knowledge about something that we're really passionate about.
And it was good. You had a good mix of people in the room, didn't you? I mean, that's one of the things that sort of came over to me. So look, we're not going to go through the whole program and talk and blah, 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 but just sticking with yourself at the moment, just Becky, can you give us a few of the highlights or just a few of the themes that you were tackling? Who was involved?
Yeah, so we had a big range, as I said. We started kind of looking at the current landscape. So we had Christina Basmalis, who spoke a lot about what's available and what's within healthcare with the lens of AI. We also had Ben Howlett, who had that kind of more political background, talking about the policy around AI. So once we set the scene, we moved into how we can make this real. So we had Manuel Matola, who spoke with James around practical applications. And then we had a range of speakers talking about case studies. So that was inside and outside of pharma, but charity as well. We then did a hands-on workshop. So the participants could like basically have a go at looking at what they would do with some of our specialist speakers. And then we looked at the future. So we kind of took everyone on a bit of a journey to kind of allow them to really understand how it could be real for them, and also listen to learnings from people across pharma.
Again, from a personal point of view, it's interesting sitting in the audience and getting real case histories being presented, and quite openly, and there's some good open discussion. And sort of queuing you up as one of the well, I say speaker, you were a panelist, and it's probably a better way of describing that, because you were on the panel towards the end. Just talk to us a little bit directly about what you were there talking about, and the sort of the theme of the panel that you were a part of, and see where we go with that.
Maybe before we even get to that, I'd probably like to comment on just reflecting on what we've heard from Rebecca and actually how you're talking about this event. The thing that really struck me was the energy of the people in the room, the connection of the people in the room. We're talking about AI as a tool for good. But ultimately, I think the thing that's people are railing against or struggling with is how do you bring that human element and the technology together in a way that's effective? And that's the thing I'm starting with, the fact that actually it was those people being able to frankly engage, to share thoughts and opinions, to share best practice, to openly talk about the issues or the challenges. I think was massively important. I think that has to remain as a core element of this type of work, particularly as we think about how do we apply and adopt AI to our better practices. I had the pleasure of joining the panel with Christina, as mentioned earlier on, Fran, with Callum. We had the opportunity, as Jess gave us a little bit of a grilling around the human aspects of appropriate application of AI. And actually, that's it. I think I wish we had a bit more time, actually, because I think we just scratched the surface on a couple of the key topics that potentially sort of sit in that space. But I think we're able to highlight some of the things in terms of how this is really helping people. It's helping people to be a lot more effective. It's helping people to be a lot more efficient. It's helping in some ways to stimulate different thoughts and thinking. But we also touched on some of the issues or the challenges, particularly when we think about how equally distributed access is to these type of tools and resources to support people's excellence. In the day or on the event, we talked a lot about things like bias and how that potentially creeps into the outputs that the system use. But I think, in addition to that, we talked really explicitly around some of the simple things and practical things that you can do potentially to address that. But if you don't know that, then it's really difficult that you haven't got that opportunity. So I think it's really important that we keep these type of conversations alive. And that's essentially what we start to really call through some of those core assets of making sure that as we use technology to deliver better practice, we keep that human aspect, and we really think hard around how we grow together as people and technology.
I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it? I mean, we've it's only a couple of years, really, for most of us, really talking about how all this sort of technology is directly affecting us. But, we're very, very much immersed at the moment in the discussions around the human element. however we address it, or what labels and how we talk about it, sort of thing. And it always intrigues me. And I mean, it was a common theme throughout the day, and I'm struggling to remember absolutely clearly, but I'm sure, but certainly my impression is there were times when we were talking about this old problem of, will it take our jobs or not? What does it do with junior level jobs where people are coming in or have traditionally come in to do grungy work, and now you're sort of giving that to the AI, and we're all concentrating on the creative, interesting stuff. But how did we learn to become creative and strategic in this business if we didn't go through the ropes and all the rest of it? But this sort of tiptoeing around it, I mean, I have to say I'm sort of a bit more at the disruptive end of the spectrum and less worried about people's jobs being disrupted. And actually, I think people need to adapt, and I think there'll be new jobs and all that sort of thing. But I do hear a lot of people being quite concerned about that. James, to bring you in, I mean, and maybe firstly some comments about the meeting and your sort of impressions as a delegate, but specifically just following that line of thought, if I can split that into two. You're involved in bringing these sorts of technologies into an organization, into the change management and all that sort of thing. So is what I'm saying true in real life, or is everyone just going whoopie-doo-dah, it's all okay? But start with some reflections on the meeting itself and what you got out of it.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So I think when I first joined J&J in the industry a couple of years ago, about a month into the role, I went to Camino's first event. And I know you were kind of a fledgling agency at the time, and it was a very small, intimate event. And I think to come back and see how much you've grown as an agency, but also what you're delivering now and the kind of scale of the event was really impressive. So I think people were really kind of blown away by the scale of it, the people that were there to talk. So, an MP, CEOs, clinicians, there was something for everyone. So it was really nice to see. I really like the diversity of opinions in the room. I think when it comes to AI, when you go on, LinkedIn, for example, you're seeing a lot of tech CEOs hype up the technology. They're always talking about the innovation and the disruption. I think for a lot of people, it's taking a while for that to really trickle through. So it can feel like there's a disconnect, but to sit there in the room and hear about people's real challenges and some of the real kind of hurdles that we need to overcome to implement this technology, I think people found that really refreshing, and having the opportunity to have those conversations with people as well. So the event itself was really good, and I think everyone had a really good time. Thinking about my experiences, I was thinking about this the other day when I was talking to AI and talking about AI and the adoption of it. And someone was explaining to me, this was the analogy they used, that in the 1980s they invented the internet, but it's only really in the 2010s that companies like Amazon really kind of came into their stride in developing and delivering an e-commerce model. So it's taken decades for them to get there, and that wasn't because the technology itself was necessarily that lacking, but it was because the consumers needed to change, the organizations needed to change, society as a whole needed to change to adopt the technology. And I think when you work in a large organization like I do, you feel that as well. So, I see a lot of hype around AI, all the transformative things that it can bring. But from where I'm sat, I see a huge amount of other kind of hurdles, whether that's people needing to adopt a slightly different mindset, to upskill, to navigate a lot of red tape, to make sure that there are safety features in place. Addressing all of that root and branch is a long journey that will take a long time, and also very necessary to make sure that we're delivering in a way that we should.
And I feel like I want to say, and go on, give us an example. I want to get a sense of the challenges within an organization. Obviously there's a limit to what you can say, I get that, but I'm sort of interested just on a human level, the sort of challenges you're facing, and also because there must be a range of people, some embracing and some pushing you back, sort of thing.
Yeah. So I think for context, before I joined Pharma a couple of years ago, I used to work for a string of small biotech companies that weren't in the clinical space. So very low regulation and very kind of, we're not risk averse. So we're very kind of accepting of taking risks, doing challenging things and making mistakes. So, you could just take an AI tool and run with it. You didn't need to speak to anyone. The trust was there. And that was often something that was pushed top down. Working in pharma, the UK is one of the most regulated markets in the world in pharmaceuticals. We've got the code. And then there's all sorts of other kind of processes and regulations you need to navigate internally. And they're all for good reason. I know we moan about them a lot in pharma in the UK, but they are there for a reason, and they serve their purpose. I think with that, it brings a culture of being cautious and making sure you're not putting anyone, such as a patient or a clinician, at risk, and you're making sure that everything is above board. But I think with that, you maybe wouldn't always feel incentivized to try something new and take a risk. So adopting these new technologies in a way that works within your kind of cultural microcosm is really important. And it's understanding the people and the incentives to try new things and doing it in a way that works for your organization.
No, I mean, I'm a bit flippant about it. So, but in practice, are there people who are sitting there literally going, I don't want to get involved in this because I think it might take my job? Is it as extreme as that in an organization like yours?
I think it's almost the other way. I think, if you look at the NHS is another good example, because I see a lot of parallels between pharma companies and the NHS. I think both organizations or industries want to move more quickly with digital technologies, let alone AI. But there is so much interlocking process and perceived risk that people do want to move more quickly. But it's never, because these organizations are so complex, where the risk lies and who it sits with can be very difficult to work out, versus when you work at a small company, you can really take something and run with it. So it's not always clear. And I think also that you've always got to think about personal incentives. We always talk about organizations as a whole, but we are groups of people, right? And people thinking day to day, what's in this for me? And if you work in an organization where you see a lot of upside and very little risk, you are going to adopt it and run with it really quickly. That might not be the case in an organization where you see a huge amount of risk that presents challenges to you. Jan, have you got your hand up?
Yeah, here's me in the unscripted conversation trying to be a little bit cordial.
Get involved.
I think James is making such a valid point. I think coming at it from that whole perspective of the highly regulated industry that we sit in right now, but ultimately we're not the only highly regulated industry in the world. There are other industries that are essentially even more highly regulated, and I'd make a bet that they're probably a bit further down the line in terms of how they apply the uses of AI to support their outputs and the ends. As you were talking, James, you got me thinking, and something that I left the meeting with last week was particularly when we had the opportunity to listen and hear some of the great examples of best practice. I'm not completely surprised that those applications were based on trying to use AI to solve business problems, right? Which is great. What I didn't see and what I don't see is the same hunger to apply it to developing the people who use it, which I think is a really interesting opportunity. And I know it starts to address, James, what you were just starting to talk through there as well. And is that part of what needs to happen for this really to be successful? I think we need to obsess around models, data, and scale, but we also need to think about how do we make sure that we're nailing in the fundamentals. And those fundamentals might be things like thoughtful training that helps people to understand the context of the tools and resources and how they use it. It might be around human-centered change management. I think often we see this nice shiny new thing that people say, right, brilliant, you've got this, go away and use it. But actually you've got the fear of, well, actually, what's the potential consequences of doing this really well right now to me or other people a bit further down the line? And I think the last bit for me is always around that real investment in terms of capability and confidence. I know, like most organizations have got tools and assets like Copilot. Most people haven't got a clue about the actual capability and how they can use that to make them much more efficient. And some of that is actually, well, if I put this information into this thing or ask it to do these things, people are getting more information about how I'm working, or does this feel like it's cheating? And most organizations are creating now safe spaces where they've got their own version of ChatGPT or whatever that might look like. And again, people are concerned or questioning, what can you put into there? And over again, I see like the technology is out there, and it's almost like after the technology is out, we're now going to do these boot camps where we're going to drill people to get the most out of how they can potentially use it. And I just think, it's all wrong there. From a learning design perspective, you're on the back foot straight away, and we need to start thinking about how we take these use cases and really plot around how we embed them in a way that's really effective. It aligns to the values of the organization, the strategic goals that we potentially set, but also aligns to how the people that we work for us or serve us are working, what they need to sort of see in a way that they can effectively engage in it and generate the value that these tools potentially sort of hold. So I think very similar to what you were saying, James, particularly from a regulation perspective, but I think there's something else in there around really thinking hard about how we do this type of work really effectively. I also recognize that takes time, effort, and certain types of expertise. And sometimes when we sort of see, oh, if we just use this to take all this data and split something out, that's the bit that we start, but we just need to take a few steps back, I think, and then potentially really think about harnessing the potential of it.
It's one of the problems in an organization, let alone for individuals, but in an organization, the problem that we're still very new into all of this. You know, as we're talking, you know, there's probably press releases coming out about new tools and new versions. And, you know, when you're talking about training and supporting individuals, part of the problem is it's quite, you can't just go, this is the product, I'll train you in how to use it, and off you go. It's just not like that. So it's all about opening up the space and the mind space and the culture to allow experimentation within some guardrails. But a lot of people just get overwhelmed at how much is coming and how fast it's changing. So any decision I make today is out of date next week. So let's not make a decision.
I was just going to add, because I think that was one of my main takeaways from last week. And actually, James, to loop back to the workshop that we did when we first met you, I remember standing up and presenting then on using AI to like analyze brand messaging and thinking it was like the coolest thing ever, that it could kind of like read images or create images. And we just were so excited about it. And then obviously last week, you know, we're presenting on like some of our case studies included massive like AI powered Congress coverage or AI avatar Eva that we've created. And that's just in a year or so. We've gone from like simple analysis of messages to creating, an avatar that speaks at a Congress. And it does move really quickly. And we've all, like you say, we come into work one day and there's like a different tool that we can now use. And I think we take it for granted a bit at Camino because it is really embedded in our daily practice. You know, we all use ChatGPT for all sorts of different things. But I think it is like, it's hard to kind of get it out there because different people use things differently, and jumping the gun a bit. But we've actually started looking internally into like how our, I guess, SDIs or your insights actually impacts how you use tools like GPT. So for example, I'm very like blue in my SDI, but also yellow if you use insights. I know that there's challenges with both of like how you use those anyway, but like the way that I use GPT is very different to someone who's like much more direct or detail oriented. I just kind of put in some polite waffle and hope that something good comes back, but I'm just like super nice to it. So I think it is really interesting to see that as well, that like you and I would use it completely differently and our outputs might be different because of that. So yeah, it's definitely not one size fits all, and it's evolving so quickly, which makes it super exciting. But you have to stay on top of it. You have to keep your eye on it.
It's funny, isn't it? We're all being super nice to it in case they take over. And but another problem, which I just want to stick in there, is we talk about this like AI is AI. And actually, just listening to what you're talking about, you've covered so many different grounds and tools and approaches and all sorts of things. I mean, one of the things I used to get very excited about, and I just now accept that, is, you know, when it's like AI in this, and you go, well, you're going to have to tell me more, you know, be more specific than that, because that's just a stupid thing to say. But how else do you deal with it? Yeah, you were trying to come in with something there, I think. And so I wanted to give you a bit of space there as well. I think from the point of view of training and the culture of experimentation, I think is one of the terms.
Yeah. And I think that's the point I was making. I think it's not necessarily just about structured training. That's one aspect of it. But you've got to create the culture where experimentation is the norm. And I think we talk a good game about actually culture of experimentation, but actually I don't necessarily always see that as something that works. That experimentation negates time. It means that actually you might always get things right first time. And in part of that experimentation, you probably also have to get good at sharing the things that aren't working in the same way that you share the things that do work. And I think culture, that's something that most organizations are constantly working to sort of get to grips with. But I think, Rebecca, you went into that next space actually, where I think it's really interesting, is that whole idea of like prompt engineering being like the new literacy. Like if I often sort of think about people that are super capable, people that really go a long way, one of the skills that I often sort of think is really common sense, but not common, is the ability to ask great questions. You see people that can hold a room and listen to what's being said, and they'll ask a question that either brings other people in, makes something really complicated less complex, or allows you to distill down to a couple of options so you can make a choice. And I think the technology is the same when we start thinking about the people that are really going to succeed are the ones that are able to prompt effectively. They're asking great questions to an agent, which can then support them to get great outputs. And I think that to me was another really key and critical topic that came throughout the day, actually, in terms of this is a case of the quality that goes in really closely relates to the quality that potentially goes out. And whether that's thinking very differently about how you use this as a tool, it's not always necessarily just about can you do X for me, but actually, can you use it as a thought partner? Can you ask it to ask you questions? I think we talked about using it as a tool to self-coach. There's so many different ways that based on allowing it to guide you through the questions, you can give it more context and information to really personalize the value and the quality of the outputs. And I think going through those different processes can also help you to think differently about, okay, how do you use this based on your personal styles, the way that you learn, the way that you communicate. And those are all things that I think we need to invest that continued time to effectively learn, which goes a little bit back to how do you marry up that experimentation and effective teaching and learning. And actually, even on the day, I think there was a really cool session that looked at how do you build really high quality prompts, like being able to make sure everybody's got that. That's like the 101 stuff that we all need to make sure that we're okay with these days, right?
I think just to build on that, because reflecting on what I was saying earlier about having worked in organizations where there's a culture of experimentation, often smaller organizations, I think a huge part of that is fun. We don't use the F word much in pharma, but it's absolutely key. It's absolutely key to learning and development. And if you've ever run a workshop or a training workshop and you've made it fun, and you made it engaging, it makes all the difference in what people learn and what they take away from it. And I think a lot of AI is being pushed top down in large organizations. And when I imagine this, the CEO or senior leadership looking at a dashboard, they're looking at productivity, financial metrics, and that's often used in the language. So they're saying, how can we be more efficient? How can we be more productive? I don't turn up to work each day and think, how can I be more efficient and productive? Because I'm not a robot, right? And I think part of the issue is we are, in large organizations, we're not incentivizing people to use it in a way that works for them. We're not making it fun. We're not making it engaging. And this is where I think Adventures in Pharma did a great job of that. So we were workshopping it, we were being creative together. But that's something that I think has been a bit culturally lacking in those larger companies.
Just out of interest, we'll run out of time soon, so I'm going to have to be a little bit careful here. But if I can put you on the spot, if you're not going to answer, just say no. But have you got an example or two you could share? And I'm going to start with James, of actually something that you're doing in your current work or personal life where you would go, AI has affected that. I want to keep this as broad as possible to give you the biggest opportunity you can to give me a useful example back that's relevant. But you see what I'm getting at. Is there something that you'd go, yeah, actually I'm doing that, and that's something that is making a difference?
Yes, I can offer some examples from my personal life. I've been on the journey of kind of wrangling with ChatGPT quite a bit over the past couple of years, and I remember when it first came out and everyone was talking about a chatbot, and I thought, chatbot, that's what you try to speak to when you get a bank statement or whatever. They don't work very well. Why is everyone so hyped about it? But when I first used it, I was really blown away by what it could do. And I think going on that journey and seeing how it's developed has been really interesting. So image generation now I think is pretty good quality on ChatGPT. Sometimes it does generate some slightly weird things, but I'm in the process of moving house, and I'm really happy with this. This is the new house that I'm moving to, but the render on the front, I really don't like it. I'm a bit vain about that. So I've been working with ChatGPT to try and generate different styles, and I've really enjoyed that. And I'm shocked at actually how well it can integrate different prompts and provide really good visual creativity. And then thinking about the inside of my house as well, what if I wanted to do this room in this style? Or here's a picture of my mate's room or something off Pinterest. Can you do it in this style? And I think that's quite overlooked, because I think there's been a reputation that the image generation capabilities of a lot of these tools is somewhat lacking. But I think to Becky's point earlier, it's moved so fast that actually it's really showing its strengths now.
Is it fair to say, and that's quite a nice example, but is it fair to say, would you describe this as using it to help you, like an assistant, and prompting thought and creativity, and it's good, rather than answering the question, this is how you want it, James, to look like this. That you're actually just going, I want some ideas, I'm thinking about it, and it's like your buddy alongside you bouncing ideas off. Is that a fair way of looking at it?
I think it might be a bit reductive, but I think these AI tools for me can do two things at the moment. They can make me more efficient and productive, you know, the serious stuff, or they can bring creativity and new ideas that I haven't considered. And it's in my personal life. So another example, so Friday night, you know, I can't be bothered to cook. I've got a few random ingredients in the cupboard. ChatGPT, what can I make with them? It's a really simple thing, but it makes it so much easier.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got one eye on the clock. Sorry, guys. Yeah, basically the same question to you, but I have a couple of minutes. But I would like to see whether you've got an example that you could share with us of what you're doing in your real life.
I love the examples that James has shared there. I've not done it, but I've heard examples of people taking a picture of what's in the cupboard in terms of the food.
Yeah.
And then ChatGPT being able to share, actually, this is what you can make with what you've got, or if you get this, you can make this. So you might be missing this ingredient. So that's brilliant. I'm, as we sort of talked earlier on, recently out of industry, and I've spent the last 6 months setting up my own entity business in the Black Sherpa Limited. And I'm a solo entrepreneur with limited resources. Technology has been a really important part of how I get things done. And there's so many use cases I've been able to explore, and potentially a very different way from how I could do within the confines of an organization that I worked for previously. And whether that is down to the quality of the note app that usually comes into the calls and conversations that I have, that doesn't just give a playback of what the conversation was, but it's giving me feedback on my personal performance as somebody that's conducting and hosting those conversations. It's helping to make sure that I can deliver maximum value to the people I've discussed in terms of what we might do next. And I can use that then to think very creatively about maybe what I missed and what we could potentially do better. It's helping me from a content perspective. It's helping me to do research and validate my thoughts and ideas. There's so many different ways that this technology is making me more efficient, more effective, and hopefully delivering more value to the people that I work with and collaborate with. So hopefully that gives a little bit of context from work focus.
And just before, I want to end with Becky, but I'm just talking. I mean, the equity question is where you sit, as it were. Just say a few words on that, because I think it's an important part of this discussion. We started on it. I'd just like to give you a moment to just sort of like reflect on that from your particular point of view.
This came up as a conversation point, particularly towards the end of the day. And actually, in some of the follow-up, I had a couple of really interesting conversations with James. One of the things that I called out, we did what I thought was an amazing exercise where we had the opportunity to take on some real-life problems in a little hackathon. And everybody was encouraged to use, for example, ChatGPT to help in terms of those idea creation elements. And just an observation I sort of gave was, on that 4-box matrix of the ideas that we generated, everybody's ideas ended up being pretty much top right. So you didn't see anything that was potentially really high value, but maybe difficult in terms of its feasibility to deliver, if that makes sense to you.
You have to slightly explain, because I can't remember it, and people won't be understanding what you mean by the 4-box matrix.
So we put all of our ideas and map them onto a matrix, looking at the value of the idea and the feasibility to be able to deliver it. But because of the way that we came up with the ideas, I think what you started to see in our group, and it might be different in other groups, is the majority of the ideas that were captured were in the top right. And the question I was asking myself is, are we missing some of the human potential to come up with stupid ideas, wacky ideas, things that won't necessarily routinely be the thing that we do? But one of the things I've always loved about brainstorming is that you might start with something that is ridiculous or isn't feasible. But then the human potential is to figure out, okay, how can we make that happen? How do we potentially change that? And as we start to rely on this technology so effectively, then does it cut out some of that creativity that we could potentially capitalize from? You might say that makes us more efficient, brilliant. But ultimately, the other challenge is those outputs are based on the people that are using the technology. And that's where you then start to sort of think about the bias and the equity in terms of what are the potential outputs that people might potentially see. So I think there's an important point around how we use it as an asset and tool, but then we marry that with creativity, for example, to drive innovation. But then the last point was around equity. And the last question I think we had on the day was, will this technology help to address global equity gaps? Which I felt was a powerful question, but a really big question. And we had a couple of different responses in the room. And actually, I think the initial answer is actually, yes, it could. Like the proliferation of data, the access to information, the ability to use this technology potentially could have some big differences. But the challenge is you align that access to resource, and that's the thing that potentially can drive apart the equity opportunity in that space. And the reality is it's likely to open that divide to some aspect. That's my opinion. Not everybody might have the same. But the opportunity now is to think about what are the choices that we can make to ensure that we minimize that impact or make sure that impact moves in a positive way. But then my final thing is we start with these massive and lofty outputs where we're going to save the world, whereas that's difficult. And actually, it might take a long time. And the opportunity for us is to think about what are the small things that we can do now that potentially allow us to ensure that that issue doesn't come in the future. And I think that's some of what we need to ensure that we do. While we instill and we think about big system thinking, we also need to really think about what are the practical steps that we can do that allow us to move towards those big goals. And I hope anybody that left what was a brilliant meeting last week took away just a couple of small things that they can apply practically that will support them personally, whether that's looking at how you render the house, decorate the bedroom, book a holiday, or professionally in terms of how you manage your time and get the most out of the resources that you have available.
There's so much we could talk about here. And Becky, I'm going to put you slightly under pressure because you've got like 30 seconds, minus 30 seconds. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to finish this now. But just give us a little bit of I'd still like to know what your example would be. And then I'd just like you to sort of wrap up, maybe a little bit of a reflection from Camino's point of view on the event.
Yeah, maybe I'll combine them both for you because I guess I'd probably use adventures as a good example because very similar to what Jan was saying, we're a really creative team, right? As individuals, we have these big ideas, but AI actually, I think, helps us make them happen. There's so much that went into adventures that came from us as humans, but AI helped us get there much more quickly. Like a lot of the artwork was hand-drawn, but we then played on things like the animations used tools like Hedra to bring the characters to life and talk. So I'd say it was a really good example of both, using AI tools to their best potential because, we've got experts, we're lucky to have that, but it was then our opportunity to demonstrate to others how you can do that, on different scales. So I think it was a good example of end-to-end experience with AI being used at every stage. Even I wrote the tech agenda, but AI reviewed it for me to make sure there were no errors in timing. So really, really simple things like that, it does make a massive difference.
That's great. Honestly, I'm so sorry because I just love these. I want these conversations to carry on going, and I could talk with each of you individually for some time, and I might well bring you back. But for today, hopefully we're given some useful information, a sense of what we talked about, and put some ideas in people's heads, which is the main thing. I know I can speak for you, and anyone who wants to can follow up with you. LinkedIn is the easy way. I think it's fair to say that you've talked about the characters and all the rest of it you developed, Becky. I mean, the whole sort of image of Adventures in Pharma was very strong, and I personally assume that is going to continue because there's a very sort of campaignable, long-lasting. I can see it stretching out ahead of us. Okay, so I'm looking forward to what you do with that. But just for today, I'm going to say a huge thank you. As I say, anybody watching this, please follow up. If you want to know more about what I'm doing, NetworkPharma TV, and you'll find hundreds and hundreds now of videos of people talking about stuff that's relevant to the pharma and biomedical industry. So reach out to me or go and have a look at NetworkPharma TV and enjoy the videos. Thank you, guys. Quick wave, and we'll say goodbye. Take care. Bye.